Hello, my name is Ryan Smith, and I'm the Director of Content and Industry Marketing here at Extreme Networks. And I am extremely excited to have you joining us today because we've got a wonderful webinar planned for you, and that is overcoming IT pain points to advance the clinical experience. And so we're going to be talking about some of the IT pain points that maybe some of you are experiencing, and then we're going to show you a preview of a research report that we did with HIMSS to look at what some of those causes may be, and we'll have some of the answers that you might be able to consider as to how you might address those. From there, what we'll do is we're going to go into the agenda. And so in today's agenda, what we're going to do is we're going to introduce you to our speakers who you see on the screen. And then we're going to talk about those major shifts in healthcare and digital. Those are the things that we're seeing as significant trends causing waves in the healthcare industry. Like I said before, we're going to give you a preview of our market research project with HIMSS, and then we're going to talk about the kind of the IT strategy and investment outlook that we saw in the research. Finally, we're going to be at HIMSS, so we're going to give you a little bit of preview of where you can find us and where you can learn more about the information that we're sharing with you today. All right. So with that, I'd love for you to meet Evan Kirstel, and he is a B2B thought leader with an audience of over 550,000 people on social media. He's a #1 influencer in areas like telecom, cloud, unified communications, 5G, IoT, CX, and more. Top tech brands hire him to achieve massive visibility and scale. With 30 years of experience in enterprise sales, alliances, and marketing, Evan brings a unique perspective on opportunities in the future of work. He is also the co founder of Evira Health, serving the global health tech community. We've also got Doug McDonald, who has over 25 years experience as an IT professional. Now, he has a deep background in healthcare, including enterprise strategy, security, and mobility. He holds an EMBA in IT leadership and highly achieved has recently achieved a fellow status with the HIMSS organization. Doug is a regular speaker at industry leading conferences and co-author of the HIMSS Infrastructure Roadmap and the book Wi-Fi Enabled Healthcare. So I want to thank both of you for joining me here today.
Thanks, Ron.
Thanks
Great
so
to be
much.
here.
Yeah, I'm really honored and excited in the lead up to HIMSS in Chicago next week. So what a great timing for this discussion.
Awesome. Awesome. And I think it's going to be a great one. So let's get right on into it. Here we go. These are going to be the three big industry shifts. So as we start looking at how things are moving within the healthcare industry, I think that what we'll find is that there are three main movements that are changing the way that healthcare is delivered, changing the conversation, and really affecting how plans are being made into the future. So let's get into it, and I'd love to hear your perspectives on this. The first one is really about the total experience, delivering and maintaining that quality healthcare experience, not just for patients, but for the providers and the staff. And so as a result, we've probably thought in the past, at least my experience, is that delivering healthcare is really about patients who need care and the providers who bring that care to them. But now we have to think more broadly about everyone who walks onto that campus, everyone who interacts with the technology. The experience needs to be thought of in a more holistic fashion. So what's your reaction to this?
Ryan, this is one of my favorite topics right now, the total experience. I think if we look through it and you hit it on the head, patient satisfaction and patient facing applications and portals and ease of scheduling and all the great guest Wi-Fi, all the things are about the patient. And that's so important. However, when we start to look at some of the shifts that we're talking about here, and you look at some of the staff and the clinicians, and I think there's a new shift in saying, hey, we need to put some investment where perhaps, or some thought around some things that have been missing for our clinicians. And what I mean by that is, as IT provisioners, we've been thinking about, say, um, alert fatigue and all these alarms and buzzers and what's really important and how do I tune out some of that noise. So we have been thinking about this. What I think it's so important to think about is providers really have a lot of opportunity to go where they want to practice medicine. And if they're in an environment where perhaps that experience is missing on the provider side, let's say you're fumbling around with technology all the time, it's slow, there's systems that are down, there's things going on all the time where it's just not fun to deal with technology and it's distracting from that, pinnacle of patient care. We've got to think more about that, and more investment needs to go there. If you have to sign into 10 different portals to do one task, that's not going to be a satisfier for our providers and our clinicians. They're busy trying to benefit and provide a great experience overall for the patients. And if they're fumbling around with this tech, it's just not where we want to be.
100%. My wife is a nurse, and I definitely know that her job is already stressful, and if technology becomes an obstacle, it makes a stressful day a bad day. And that's one thing that we can absolutely do something about. Isn't that right, Evan?
Yeah, well, thank your wife for all of us, because nurses are the backbone of this healthcare system. And wow, are they under pressure? I mean, just zooming out, we're in the midst of a healthcare crisis, and it's part people, it's part process, it's part technology, and nurses and practitioners and doctors, physicians feel that the most, and patients, despite when you go into a hospital, your practitioner's office, it may not feel like they're in crisis mode, but there's a tremendous behind the scenes sense of urgency to transform that patient experience. And technology is like the building block, the foundation for everything else. And that's what I'm so excited to dive into in this session.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that we don't think about, even as we're talking about, providers and staff and the patients, but there's also that other group of people that we don't think about that much, but those are the family members, the friends, even people who are people who are delivering materials. All of them need to have a quality experience, because technology can either be a facilitator or it can get in the way. And so that's where we bring to our next big trend, and this is really around building that digital health platform. This is where we're seeing how technology has now become, in this slide, the circulatory system of all things that's going on within the hospital body. And that's not only just related to patient care, but we're also looking at facilities management, we're looking at patient entertainment, and other things, back office and the like. So, let's talk a little bit about that digital health platform that exists today that perhaps didn't exist when I was a kid.
It's advanced so much, Ryan, and the past couple of years I think have taught us so much. And I've often referred to IT as a kind of the lifeblood of healthcare. And what I think we've found, and I'm not a meme guy, but I have a meme on my desktop that is, what has driven your digital transformation? And the pandemic is circled, and maybe that's a good or bad thing, I don't know, but I think that's really put in the mind of a lot of providers that things can change so rapidly, from staffing and some of the stuff we'll talk about, the debt, all these things together. All these outside factors don't matter. It's still people like your wife, Ryan, that are in the trenches, that are taking care of people and making people better. That's what's really important. So as a whole, how do we as technologists meet or exceed the demand, the expectations of all these things coming together? And how do we succeed in that fashion? It's really difficult. So I'm looking forward to talk about that some more.
Awesome. So Evan, one of the things that you do a lot of research on are devices and things like that, like IoT. You know, how are these emerging technologies encroaching into the healthcare delivery space?
Well, they're coming from everywhere. And as you pointed out, digital health is more than an app that lives on your phone. It's a device or a wearable that lives on your body. So we've gone from the Internet of Things to the Internet of Medical Things. And these devices, these wearables are, literally life-saving, mission-critical devices where connectivity is paramount. So whether it's, healthcare at home, hospital at home, with remote patient monitoring, whether it's in the doctor's office or the healthcare setting, there are now just a universe of devices that connect to your body in some way. And the Internet of Medical Things relies on a network that is 24/7 and secure and accessible and available. And so it's a fantastic initiative in terms of digital health technologies, but it requires kind of a game changer in terms of the enabling technology behind those health apps and devices. So almost a rethink of our communications infrastructure when it comes to wearables.
Yeah, 100%. And it's very interesting because I've had some opportunities to talk to people who are, involved in technology with regards to these emerging technologies, wearables, IoT devices, and things like that. And as we begin to expand to the home, I think that puts a lot of pressure on IT staffs because no IT leader anywhere wants to support home technology. I think that's a universal truth. But I think that brings us to our third big trend, and that is the hyperscaling of telehealth and virtual care. So, Doug, I mean, this becomes a really, really big inflection point for IT leaders because used to there was the walled garden of technology that you had to support that was just in the hospital or just on the campus. But now as we're looking at distributing healthcare farther and farther from the hospital due to capacity and moving closer and closer to the patient's home, that that protection has to extend with it. The support has to extend with it. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about telehealth and what that responsibility is for those IT leaders as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at the statistics, Ryan and Evan, they're staggering, right? The amount of increase in telehealth is crazy. I was just looking at a report yesterday and looking at 34x of, and you hear all sorts of different numbers, right? We can all agree that the numbers are astounding. And thank goodness, a lot of organizations had some semblance of foundational layers of telehealth operating. We just pushed it to the red line pretty much across the board to take this to the next level from the conditions from the pandemic, et cetera. So we talk a lot here at Extreme about the infinite enterprise. And the infinite enterprise concept is really about healthcare or workers or all these things are happening wherever they may be. So whether it's you're at your home or whether it's you're at a extended care facility, maybe you're at work and you shut your door and you have a televisit. All these possibilities of crossing state lines and having specialists in other countries be able to consult with you. There's no doubt about it that it's groundbreaking. We all know that. What will be very interesting to see, and I've been tracking this quite a bit and keep a close eye, is some of the regulations that have been pushed in the last few years are starting to kind of come back to where they were maybe pre-pandemic levels. So some of these intrastate or some of these rules that may have been flexed are starting perhaps to go in the wrong direction. So I'm very interested to see how that's going to impact the continued growth of telehealth. Of course, it's not going anywhere. And I hope that the folks that set these rules, and for good reason, that are looking and analyzing how these things work and continue to make sure that we don't let certain confines, limit our ability to continue to expand this great technology.
All right, Evan, what do you have to add?
Well, we saw telehealth going from a nice to have to a must have during the pandemic. And in my opinion, it's a fundamental requirement to enhance accessibility and affordability. I'm here in Boston. We have some of the best hospital systems in the world on our doorstep. But you go to much of the country, particularly rural America, and a specialist or just a provider might be hours away. So if you're really going to open up, our healthcare system and provide access to those who need it, telehealth is a must-have. It's a mandatory, and that opens all kinds of new requirements to the network for high-quality voice and video and broadband access points and other ways to get access to patients. So really, really important to the future of healthcare in this country.
Yeah, absolutely. And where I grew up, which was in a very small town in Texas, there
Mm.
were we relied on rural hospitals, and so this is the makings for another webinar with regards to how do we address the closing of rural hospitals, and how do we begin to extend care to these hard to reach areas, especially whenever those facilities that are fundamental to these rural areas become less and less. So telehealth virtual care becomes a more and more important type of delivery of healthcare, given the fact that in order to reach people farther and farther afield, there may not be anyone nearby, or they would have to drive even farther. So there you have it. Those are the three big trends that we see affecting the healthcare industry. So now, as we start talking, let's look at what we looked at from the research report. So our next slide here is really around the HIMSS market research that we conducted over over a couple of months, and we're going to talk a little bit about healthcare's technical debt. Before we get into the research, there's a couple of things that we need to know, and this is really just an overview of how we conducted this survey, and then the methodology. Like I said before, it was conducted over a couple of months, December 2022 and into January 2023, and we were speaking to healthcare tech leaders around their IT strategies and challenges. Some of the things that we were talking about are listed here. One of the things that we wanted to make sure that we talked about are the most significant organizational challenges, and we're gonna delve really deep into that. The negative impacts of IT staffing shortages. This is something that is pervasive just across all industries, all organizations experience these IT staffing shortages, but we're going to talk about the relationship that IT staffing shortages has on healthcare delivery, and other things that are going on within the hospital. And then we'll look at a couple of areas of investment and focus over the next 12 to 18 months. How was this survey done? We spoke to over 100 executives and IT tech leaders in healthcare within the United States. Each one of them had a role in decision making or influence on leading or supporting the overall strategy at the organization. And this was a blind data collection effort. So the respondents did not know that we were sponsoring the research. So this does not have our finger on the scale, if you will, in that regard. Okay, so with that, what we're going to do is we're going to go through and start looking at some of the results here. Biggest organizational challenges today. So approximately 6 in 10 ranked clinical staffing at appropriate levels. Cybersecurity threats and financial inflation challenges are also very big organizational challenges. And so what we did was we had them rank the top 3 things. There were a lot that were listed, but what you're going to hear me say multiple times is check out the full report if you want to see all of the rankings. So, we want you to be able to see everything, but let us know if you're interested in seeing more. These are the top 3. clinical staffing at appropriate levels, cybersecurity threats, and financial and inflation challenges. So let's talk about these three specifically. Let's start with you, Evan. What are you seeing here that really sticks out to you?
Well, I think these are all interrelated. I mean, you can't dissociate people from processes from technology. And, the threat environment as big and as robust as ever, the people side of hiring expertise, particularly cyber expertise, is as challenging as ever. And then we have the issues of, training and availability of people to run those strategies and implement, best practices. And so we're at sort of the perfect storm of people, process, and technology, and the challenge in today's real world of hiring, training, equipping and building a team to address those threats. So, it paints a pretty stark picture.
So yeah, I absolutely agree. And Doug, you were one of these IT executive leaders that were having to face this. So would you say that this is something that was consistent with your experience when you were in that role? And does this just represent a worsening of an already bad situation?
Yeah, certainly consistent. I think before we even went into the pandemic, there was a bit of a nursing shortage, for instance. So it's just been exacerbated, right? Burnout, what we talked about earlier about, not having maybe the best clinical workflows, it causes dissatisfaction. And I think a key here too is the inflationary challenges, right? The dollar is going less far than it's perhaps ever gone before, maybe at least in my lifetime. And there's a real drive on wages, and folks, Ryan, like your wife, nurses, deserve a great wage for what they just came out of, really kind of almost war zone like challenges that you face every day, and all the stories of seeing their kids through glass at night, all the things that come along with that. These non-for-profit systems aren't designed in their margins, and most of the money goes back in, but we don't have double-digit percentage growth rates for not only nurses but other staff. So that puts us in a really difficult place. Like, is it just the deep pocket, very large healthcare organizations that are able to pull these clinical staffing requirements? In the end of the day, if you don't have enough staff, you have to shut down some of your beds. Shutting down beds impacts your revenue. So it's a very, like Evan said, very challenged, maybe more than ever, place to be in healthcare in terms of those things. And as far as the cybersecurity pieces, as Evan said, completely interrelated. What I find interesting is the staffing issues have edged out cybersecurity, which most of the time, the cybersecurity concerns are at the top. So it's a very interesting time here. And I look forward to kind of talking through, there's certainly things we can do here as technologists to help some of these issues. But they're definitely something that are top of mind as really big challenges, as Evan put, in crisis. And I think that's something that we could all agree. We have our work cut out for us to continue on this trajectory.
Absolutely. And what really stands out to me, I was reading a report, it may have been from McKinsey, where it was talking about those inflationary challenges, because not only is the dollar, struggling, but also the fact that, the supply chain drove costs up. And then, a lot of the nursing staff, especially during the pandemic, realized that they could make more money by being travel nurses. So that really put upward pressure on their salaries, not only just the bonuses and things that hospitals try to do to retain them, but whenever you have organizations that are willing to pay a premium for travel nursing and things like that, all of that drives the flexibility from a financial perspective for healthcare facilities to be able to do more creative things. And so I think that really brings us to really our next topic, because we'll start driving a little bit deeper into some of the impacts of that. as we start looking at the organizational impacts of IT staffing shortages. So if there are dollars that are being dedicated to trying to retain the care, salaries and things like that for care delivery, is trying to maintain inventories of masks and other types of necessities for personal protection equipment and other types of medicines and things like that that they need, then that means that there's less dollars available for people like IT staff, technology, and stuff like that. So we start looking at what is that impact then as we get fewer and fewer IT resources to support a larger and larger footprint. What the research showed is that over 3 in 5 organizations are being impacted by delayed projects and routine tasks taking longer to complete. These are 5 different areas that we surveyed these IT leaders around what impact IT staffing shortages had. And so 2 of the really big ones are projects have to be delayed due to budget and staffing constraints. So, Doug, talk to me about, how does that balance work in an organization where there are projects that could help increase clinical productivity, but we don't have the resources to be able to actually execute or do those projects?
Yeah, and it's certainly a challenge. I always approached it in this way. We had, and I was fortunate having worked for a large healthcare organization. We had kind of that keep the lights on crew. We have the folks that are the firefighters that are geographically dispersed, that can rapidly respond and ensure the hospital grade network is alive and well, every day, every hour, 365 days a year. And then we have kind of those project SWAT teams to say, we can't advance our architecture to support all the things that are coming online without the ability to have a separation of duty between the firefighters and the strategic folks that are putting something in process to help the overall cause, right? Improve business workflow, more apps, better things, more devices, et cetera. So I think that's a way that I use to really kind of look at this in a different way. I had a very large team. One of the things that just is challenging is there's going to be turnover because IT folks aren't just healthcare IT folks necessarily. There's pressures from other verticals that want to say, hey, if this guy could kill it in healthcare, he could do great over here and support my business. Like the healthcare, maybe arguably the pinnacle in that life or death kind of critical grade network. It definitely picks out the people who are in healthcare for a long time. They're very usually strongly skilled in the area because you have to be, and the pressures are extremely high. So that's one of the ways that we worked around it. But you almost always have to be interviewing candidates. You almost always have to be looking at the next candidates for your pool and retention, right? And if the IT folks don't have a great piece in that total experience, and they also don't have what they need to have a good tech experience and the tools that they need to do their job, then that also can really impact this. So there's a lot of different things that we could slice down into this. And I know we have a bunch of different talking points on this, but that's some of the things I was looking at. One of the things I'll close on this thought is every day that I went to work in that operational role, we used to call battle hardened veterans operational role, is that there was more work to do today than there was yesterday. Because there's another app, there's another device, there's another acquisition, there's another facility opening, there's another facility moving, there's another facility under construction. It never stops. So every day you wake up, there's more work than yesterday. And how many of us in healthcare have resources and headcount coming online? Not too many. So it's always, how do we do more with less? And how do we, and I'd like to talk about this more, is how do we reduce the complexity of some of these IT systems so we don't have to have a PhD in architecture in IT or these really expensive, hard to get cybersecurity people to do what we need to do to keep the business running?
I think that that's fascinating, especially given the fact that when you look at these three middle columns, that's where you start seeing the impact of IT staffing shortages for your firefighters, right? So routine tasks taking longer to complete because there's not enough firefighters. Resolution time to solve errors and other issues have increased. So it's taking longer and to do routine tasks, and whenever there is an issue, it's taking longer to resolve that. Why? Because the fourth column says it, expertise is hard to come by, so the staff is junior, limiting the complexity of work. So Evan, hearing what Doug was saying about his experience and seeing these three slides, it sounds pretty rough for an IT organization in healthcare, doesn't it?
Well, it does. And let's be honest, we're not going to get more money. We're not going to
Right.
get more people. So that leaves smarter technology. And there are some amazing bright spots on the horizon to do more with less through things like automation, robotic process automation, through smart use of artificial intelligence. In our space, things like self-healing networks, better designed products with higher availability and reliability. There's things like, self-organized networks. There's a lot of tech in the pipeline, including at Extreme, that is going to save a lot of time, effort, and work, things that didn't exist previously in previous paradigms. So
Yep.
thank goodness, we have engineers hard at work trying to deliver technology improvements, enhancements, and performance that will save time, effort, and the amount of maintenance and other skills required, not only on the networking side, but at things like cybersecurity. AI tools are on the horizon that will, massively scale a CISO's capabilities, through AI. So
Yep.
there are some bright spots. So let's not paint a picture completely of a very dark and dismal future for healthcare IT.
All right. The last column is really around inability to maintain a proper level of safety, security for patients and employees. There wasn't, most of the respondents were either neutral or felt like there was little to no impact there. One quick thing that I wanted to highlight, though, is that there was a discrepancy between C-suite leaders and non-C-suite leaders with regards to this notion of expertise being hard to come by. That at the highest levels of the organization, it may not be as apparent the impact that junior staff has, as related to what Doug was saying around having those battle hardened people. So you can't just necessarily replace, you know, these aren't widgets that you can pull one IT person out and stick one IT person in. That experience goes a long way in being able to do more with less. Wouldn't you agree, Doug?
Absolutely. And I think this kind of, for me, talks about what Evan mentioned about training, about having those right resources. And you're right, you can't just take a person that usually is specialized, say, in cybersecurity and say, hey, you're going to go do really well at managing this complicated Wi-Fi network. Sure, there's a lot of smart IT people out there, but there's a lot of different specialty skill sets.
Right.
Some of these skill sets in which we didn't have, 3-4 years ago at all. So when you look at the training and the ability to get the right people in the right place, that's what it's all about. It doesn't surprise me to see difference between, the in trenches role and the executives. I know we, in my former roles, had a lot of executives that came out of hospitality and came out of other industries to really focus on the experience. They didn't have to necessarily be really specific in knowledge, maybe for healthcare, at least initially. So I think there's some things to think about from that perspective.
Right. And so just to wrap this section up, this is where we start talking about the notion of technical debt, because as we are looking at this decline in staffing, clinical staffing and IT support staffing, this increase in digital demand. There was one customer that we talked to that was saying that, they're onboarding like one application a week. So the digital demand on the network is getting more and more, and it's creating these acute problems that are forcing IT leaders into short-term planning to take care of the problems that are right in front of their face, as opposed to the longer term problems that are a result of perhaps hygiene and things like that you just need to do to keep the lights on. Doug, what are your thoughts on this particular scenario?
Yeah, and I think a lot of times technologists in healthcare may be forced to take that plan B or C and focus on more of the shorter term. A more mature organization that looks at things 5-7 years down the road, strategic infrastructure investment overall. And you, I remember also well the spreadsheets of, hey, our technical debt is going like this, and at some point there's a red line where we start going over the cliff, where, hey, at 8 a.m. that operating room is going down, and even though there's all these fail safes and offline things, when these clinicians lose technology in those critical areas, it's really difficult to do what they want to do. It's not optimal for sure. So I think we've got to force and continue to work. And folks used to always say I would jump up and down on the table because it was such a passionate thing that we've got to get out of this short-term planning thinking, because in the end of the day, even if you provide me the budget I've been asking for and perhaps deferring for many years, it's going to take me a long time to replace 2,000-3,000 switches across 300 facilities. This stuff doesn't happen overnight. So if you get to a point where you start to get into that red line of technical debt and you're starting to get failures and system impacts, it takes a long time. It doesn't happen overnight to get new systems in place. So I think that's something to think about, where sometimes we're forced to do short term just based on a budget perspective, but we always have to have those contingencies to think about. How can I get to that 7-year plan and work with my CFO to say, this is the money we're going to need every year, for the continuation of the business at this level, and make sure that those funds are appropriately there. Of course, there's always things like the pandemic that slightly throw curveballs into that.
Right.
The revenue that's coming in is changing, and there has to be belt tightening, there has to be delays, but getting to that strategic infrastructure investment program long-term is absolutely critical.
Yeah, absolutely. Evan, one of my favorite Price is Right games is the mountain climber, and you go off the cliff there, the yodelee-doo-ho, that one right there. Do you feel like we're getting to that point? Because, what Doug is talking about, that red line is a real red line where we start seeing things. And what really struck me is the fact that Doug said, even though there are fail safes, the crossing that red line, things just begin to fail. So, Evan, do you feel like we're getting close to that red line, or do you think we've passed it?
Well, as you get close to the red line, you have to change, and you have to change from within. And I think one thing the healthcare industry is doing and can do more of is looking outside of healthcare for solutions and to addressing these challenges, whether it's looking to an Amazon for best practices on consumer experiences or customer experiences, or looking to Extreme Networks, who can power an entire stadium full of fans through Wi-Fi. I think a lot of the solutions to change within healthcare will come from outside of healthcare, and adopting new modalities, technologies, best practices, and even people, where with big tech's retrenchment, a lot of IT folks might be available to shift industries and maybe work in healthcare to address some of these challenges. And of course, through digital health and lots of health tech startups, we're seeing the catalyst for change. So I'm optimistic about change, and hopefully, we change before we go over that cliff. And I think we will adapt. We're pretty resilient creatures, us human beings. And, I'm pretty optimistic about that.
All right. Well, now let's get into looking at the impact to IT strategy and spend. So, I think we've done a great job of scoping out the challenges and the problems, the trends that are influencing decisions. Let's see how uh, how respondents felt like they were going to start investing moving forward. The first thing is just a confirmation. 9 in 10 leaders have seen technology investments increase since the start of the pandemic. This is something that we were talking about. This is not a surprise, but it's always great to set that baseline of, you know, are we all on the same page? Did we all have to invest more? And I think that contributes to the belt tightening, that contributes to the pushing back of some of the hygienic type of investments we might have made in critical infrastructure because of the pandemic and the things that needed to happen in order to uh, to respond to that particular crisis. Let's go on to the next slide. And this is where we start talking about the biggest priorities. Now, once again, there was a long list of priorities that were stack ranked 1, 2, and 3. We're giving you the top 3. Cybersecurity, technology modernization, and digital transformation, around and customer experience are the 3 biggest priorities. So our respondents felt like cybersecurity at the very top. So this shouldn't be a surprise, Doug, that whenever we're looking at 2023 top 3 things, cybersecurity is there. But now we're seeing technology modernization and digital transformation, that movement around how we affect workflows to improve that clinical productivity and that total experience. What are your reactions to this particular slide?
I think this is a similar theme to Evan mentioned before. The cybersecurity and the digital transformation kind of are really coming together. So it's great to see that, because I think what we really need, and we talked about this a lot, is we need more agile systems to support such an agile business. And really that comes down to me in terms of architecture that can support a new application every week, can support, I used to joke around, we had a line around the building for our certification program to make sure the devices that were coming onto our network were hospital grade, they were ready. We had the right configuration, they were tested properly, all the good things you expect when a device may be hooked up to grandma, that we've done our diligence and make sure the technologists, have a input to say, hey, this is the way it should set up, and this is the security and all those great things that come along with it. So I love to see the kind of that tie between cyber and the digital transformation component, because I think that's for a long time cyber's just been at the very top, and we can all agree. I mean, if you look at some of these unfortunate events and the ransomware, and we've done really great at coming together and combating these issues. So if you don't have access to your data, it creates big problems. So I think as we continue to modernize our technology, that really helps give us that better capability to protect our organizations from a cyber perspective as well.
100%. So, Evan, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the next slide, and we're going to compare the 3 biggest IT priorities with the top 3 areas where respondents said they were going to invest. And so what we see here, cybersecurity 82%, cloud infrastructure 61%, and then insights and analytics. You had talked about automation and other types of ways that we could perhaps create a better experience in for the IT staff that's very limited. So this would signal a positive thing, given the fact that you're starting to see some of this automation and decision support systems appear in the top 3 areas of investment over the next 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, I love this slide. I mean, it's, data is king, of course, but in healthcare, healthy data is key. And so understanding how to use and apply data in a healthcare environment has never been more important, not just from the patient perspective, but for operations, for workforce planning, for management of facilities. I mean, all of these things now can be modeled using AI and machine learning. And but that requires a lot of data and solid data and access to data in real time. And I think that's reflective of this survey. And of course, cloud everywhere all the time, not just public cloud, but hybrid cloud and private cloud that needs to be protected within the hospital environment and secure and HIPAA compliant. So the priorities seem right on track. The only question is, how do you deliver on those priorities?
Right. And this is where I'm really interested in both of your reactions, because the first slide talks about priorities. This slide talks about areas of investment, but our next slide, and Doug, I want to get your reaction on this, is what are the top 3 areas of investment? So where are they putting their money first? And when we start looking at where they're putting their money first, it looks like it's cybersecurity and advanced software applications, things that will run on the network, but not necessarily the investment in the infrastructure like the 2 previous slides suggested that there might be. So talk to me about, is this short-term planning that we were talking about that creates the technical debt that we've seen in this industry?
Yeah, absolutely, Ron. This is no surprise to this. This is very consistent. What I've seen in my healthcare career is there's a lot of focus on great apps, and for good reason. But when you think about that construct of the network and how important it is to support the apps, meaning if you have a legacy network and it hasn't been updated, maybe the Wi-Fi is an older standard, it's just not up to the speed and capability that they need to be to support all these great apps. So think about, I roll in that brand new shiny X-ray machine and I'm doing a terabit study that I'm beaming to a specialist in another hospital location, and I don't have the bandwidth or the capabilities to do that effectively. Well, now the whole that, what you are trying to achieve with the investment for this great device, it is great to roll into the room and all the things. Now you're missing perhaps that network investment. So a lot of times you see it's all about the apps and all about a couple of things. And the cybersecurity often can be, guards, gates, and guns, and protect our environment at large. But a lot of times that infrastructure investment gets left out. The applications are great, but the utility factor of the IT infrastructure is key to support everything that's riding upon it.
Absolutely. And so if you want to see everything that was stack ranked by our respondents, definitely want to check out the full report. But Evan, I want to come to you. It's a 20-point difference. A 20-point difference between cybersecurity and advanced software applications, and then what you were talking about, the insights and analytics, artificial intelligence, AI ops, those types of automation type tools. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I think what this is reflecting is that the new approach to cybersecurity has to be that it's baked in everything from the beginning. It's not an afterthought. It's not a product you add on. It's not a firewall and you check the box. It's baked into equipment, devices, access points, routers, switches. It's baked into the layer 2, the layer 3, all the way up to the application. And it's baked into education of the workforce, and that reflects kind of the new paradigm of security. And it's the weakest chain link on the chain is what breaks first. And look, this from your home network. You can have a bunch of secure applications, but if your home router or Wi-Fi access point is something you bought off of Craigslist and with the default access code 1234, your network isn't secure. So it's that holistic approach to security in everything, people, processes, and devices, that means that number, that figure is so high, which is a good thing.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And so for me, just looking at it, that was one of the things where I'm really interested in seeing how as we go in through the rest of 2023 into 2024, will we see the network begin to bubble up? Because on the next slide, what we got was a resounding agreement by our respondents that the network is a strategic asset, that almost all of them agree that the IT network plays a major part in the success of hospital operations. So, let's get a little bit more prescriptive, as we start kind of comparing these key findings at the end of this, and that is that the network is the lifeblood. We saw in the very beginning the trends of how everything is being connected to it. We see the challenges of being able to support that network with fewer and fewer IT support staff, and then the impact that fewer IT support staff has on the ability to provide clinical productivity applications. So, Doug, I just want to get your, very quick, what should hospital leaders focus on moving forward?
Well, I think this is a really positive slide here, that 93%, thinks that the network is really important. So oftentimes I think sometimes it's an afterthought, but I think of really the network from a utility strategic asset. Think about electricity. Let's say we lose electricity. Well, we have generators for that. We have ways to operate, hopefully with some redundancy or resiliency for electricity. But what happens when the water goes out at a facility? Well, now the bathroom facilities become unavailable. It's usually a situation where you have to perhaps close that facility. I think networking is kind of like water in that utility example, where when the network goes down for whatever reason it may be, or it's constrained to a point where it's not able to deliver the application need at that point, then perhaps you're also shutting down that facility. Even though you may have redundancy and resiliency, sometimes these things happen. So at the end of the day, that strategic asset component comes into, you've got to have that healthcare grade, hospital grade network that is capable of not shutting down that facility, not having to have that impact on revenue, not having that patient dissatisfaction of, I went to the facility and there was something wrong with their computers and I had to come back another day. So I think I like this concept, is talk about strategic asset. I've always talked about the network. I'm a networking guy, go figure. That strategic asset is what this should be labeled on. And that longer term view of making sure we continue to care and feed that strategic asset is so important for all the great things coming. Evan talked about AI and ML. Think about all the great things that we could do if that clinician had a kiosk that automated some tasks that still provided a great experience for the patient, but that person doesn't lose their job. They just get to go do other things, perhaps more valuable things that could be, offloaded off their plate. When we talk about automation, just think about all the layers of automation and things that could help. So I agree with Evan. There's a very positive, bright future for leveraging this technology going forward and really care and feeding our strategic asset being the network.
Yeah, absolutely. And Evan, I'm gonna go to you for our final slide on the results. There's that 93% of people agreeing that the network is a strategic asset, and it's balanced by a growing number of people who are investing in network growth and expansion. So we saw that 25% of respondents have started investing and ranked it in their top 3. So there is a silver lining in all of this. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. It almost reminds me of that classic Maslow's hierarchy of needs pyramid. At the bottom you had food and security and shelter and safety, and then you sort of worked your way up to higher levels of actualization. I think someone actually once put Wi-Fi on the bottom of that. But yeah, I would say the network is sort of the base of the pyramid, and building all of these layers of advanced technology services and applications on top is kind of how people are realizing the network needs to drive that innovation. So really exciting times, and there's so much new technology in the pipeline. And we're not going to get into all of this today, but I'm a tech geek, so we're talking about things like Wi-Fi 6 and 7 and advanced technologies and things that are really going to blow our mind when it comes to that core network asset.
Right, absolutely. And so, with that, I want to thank you, Doug and Evan, for your perspectives on the research and the trends that are affecting the healthcare industry. If you are interested in seeing the full report, please reach out to us. Let us know that you're interested. We'll make sure that you get the upcoming white paper that really goes through all of the research that we have that we've collected. And so you can also do that at HIMSS 23. This is our extreme preview of what we're doing at HIMSS. So we'll be in the Cybersecurity Command Center, booth 4329, and we'll be here. I know for sure Doug and Evan will both be at HIMSS. So if you want to talk to us a little bit more about what we talked about today, I will also be there. So you can talk to all of us about the outstanding research conducted alongside HIMSS. We've got a tech talk with OSF Healthcare on Wednesday, April 19th from 9:45 to 10:05 a.m. in Theater B. That's in Hall A. And then inside our booth, we're going to have solution demos that are going to show security and analytics, because that was ranked really highly on on the investment areas. Automation and ease of use. This is something that Evan talked about in how we can overcome the IT shortages and the impacts that IT shortages have on projects, resolution of routine issues and problems, but also the ability to bring those applications to those clinicians to improve their to improve their quality of life as they work. And then finally, it's not a trade show without branded giveaways, raffle items, and more. So come join us April 17th through the 21st at HIMSS 2023 in Chicago. That's next week. We'll see you there. If there are any questions, Ryan, I don't know if there's any questions out there, but we can answer a couple if there are any.
I've also tweeted this entire session, so you can join us on Twitter at Extreme Networks and my handle at Evan Kirstel, and continue the chat there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Evan. Ryan, I don't know if there's any questions out there for us.
Sorry about that. I was on the old double mute. I didn't see any questions come in from when we presented live. I think you all did probably just an excellent job covering the material today. Certainly you can email Ryan or Doug with any follow-up questions, and obviously Evan, as he said on social media, is live streaming, so you can certainly post any questions on that thread too, and we'll be happy to answer those in real time. But also, like Ryan said, look for the follow-up email with the full report from the findings covered today.
All right. Well, if that's it, then Doug, Evan, I want to thank you both for joining me. This has been a wonderful conversation in the lead up to HIMSS. I think we're going to have an amazing show, and I think that there's going to be more coming once we get out of HIMSS and we can dig even deeper into this research. So look forward to speaking with you guys in the future. Looking forward to see you in Chicago. Travel safely. My name is Ryan Smith. I want to thank you all for joining us today, and we will catch you next time at HIMSS 2023. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.